Well, good evening, everybody, and welcome to City Hall tonight. We will go ahead and call this meeting to order. We start with an invocation, which we observe by a moment of silence, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, clerk, will you call the roll?
Corliss.
Here.
Halliburton. Morales.
Here.
Nash.
Here.
Stead.
Here.
Willetts.
Here.
5 present, 1 absent.
And we've got minutes for approval.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the minutes for the meeting on April 1st, 2025.
Second. Motion a second, clerk?
Willetts.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thank you. And now the consent agenda.
Madam Mayor, I move approval of the consent agenda.
Second. We have a motion, a second, discussion? Clerk?
Willetts.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
Thanks. And we've got a whole bunch of ordinances on, it looks like first and third readings. We'll start with first reading.
Madam Mayor, I ask unanimous consent that all ordinances on the first reading calendar be read by number and title only and filed for the second reading calendar.
Without objection.
ORD-13-25, an ordinance CAR 24-7 for property located at 900 and 908 Whitewater Park Boulevard, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way, from R-2 residential compact to R-3 residential urban, setting forth the reason statement in support of such zone change and providing effective date. ORD-14-25, an ordinance CAR 24-19 for property located at parcel S 1618317900, annexing 3.1 acres of certain lands and territory situated in Ada County, Idaho, adjacent and contiguous to the corporate limits of the city of Boise City, establishing and determining the land use classification of said 3.1 acres as I-1 light industrial, establishing and determining the sensitive lands overlay district of said acres, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such annexation and zone change, directing the city engineer to lodge and file a legal description and map for said annexed lands and territory, providing that copies of this ordinance shall be filed with the Ada County Auditor, the Ada County Treasurer, the Ada County Assessor, the Ada County Reporter, and the Idaho State Tax Commission, providing that a copy of said legal description and map of said annexed lands and territory be recorded with the Ada County Reporter and filed with the Ada County Assessor and the Idaho State Tax Commission as required by law, and providing an effective date.
Thanks. And now third reading.
Madam Mayor, I move that further reading of ORD-11-25 and ORD-12-25 be dispensed with, and the record reflect that they have been read the third time in full.
Second. We have a motion, a second, clerk?
Willetts.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. ORD-11-25, an ordinance CAR 24-1 for property located at 1770 South Maple Grove Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change the classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way, from A-1 open lands to R-2 residential compact, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date. ORD-12-25, an ordinance CAR 24-12 for property located at 2272 South 5 Mile Road, amending zoning classifications of the city of Boise City to change classification of real property, particularly described in section 1 of this ordinance and adjacent rights of way, from R-1B residential suburban to R-1C/DA residential traditional with a development agreement, setting forth a reasoned statement in support of such zone change and providing an effective date.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
I move that ORD-11-25 and ORD-12-25 be approved.
Second. We have a motion.
Madam Mayor, question on this. I would like to vote differently on these. Is it possible to split them up?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah.
Yeah. Madam Mayor, I'd ask unanimous consent to.
Just
I'm gonna-
remove your
I'm
motion.
just going to remove. I was going to ask unanimous consent to remove the motion.
Sure, without objection. That's good.
Okay. And then I move that ORD-11-25 be approved.
Second. We have a motion, a second. Discussion?
Madam Mayor, just a heads up, I'll be voting no on this because when this was heard in September, I voted against this development.
Okay, thanks.
Madam Mayor, this property is located in the airport influence zone, and yet it's not referenced in that airport influence zone. I had abstained for the original vote, and I'm going to go ahead and abstain for the vote for this tonight as well.
Okay, clerk?
Willetts,
No.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
3 in favor, 1 opposed, motion carries.
Madam Mayor, I move that ORD 12-25 be approved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second discussion. Clerk?
Willetts,
Yes.
Corliss,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Nash,
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries.
And now we have a public hearing for the evening. Welcome, everybody. So we have Catherine Bai, who will be presenting for the city. Welcome. This is your first presentation. It's great to have you. And then what I'm going to do is kind of walk through the sequence of events. We have the appellant, the Friends of Orchard at Fairview and Orchard, HOA, Larry Kirk and friends. That's okay. That's what I thought. And so then I'll have you up. And then after that, the applicant, which is J. Fisher Companies, hello, will be up. And then after that, we don't expect the neighborhood association, but I want to check. Is the West Boise Neighborhood Association here? Okay. And then I will go through and check in with public after all of that to see who would like to testify. And with that, Catherine, you're on.
Thank you. Good evening, Madam Mayor, City Council members. It's very nice meeting all of you. Before you is appeal of Design Review Commission's approval to construct a new 6-story multifamily residential building with 212 affordable housing amenities, podium parking on a 1.99 acre city-owned property. The subject property is located 200 feet south of Fairview Avenue. It is bounded by McKinney Lane to the east, El Dorado Street to the west. It is in the MX3 mixed-use active zone and with a compact land use designation. The project proposed 2 vehicle access onto the adjacent streets. The development also provides pedestrian connectivity around the project site. The building will be constructed to be 6-story with a height of 70 feet, which is at the maximum allowed height in the MX3 zone. Multifamily is allowed use in this zone, and the proposed building mass is allowed form. As such, this project only needed design review approval to assess form and design against codified standards. As outlined in the project report, the project complied with design review findings of approval, city development code, as well as adopted standards and guidelines. Here's a brief summary of the application history. A detailed summary is included in your packet. The appellant submitted 4 grounds for appeal as summarized on this slide. Along with the response to the appeal grounds provided in the council packet, staff will address each of these issues in the following presentation. The appellant contends that the project fundamentally changes established residential neighborhood through incompatible density, height, and scale. In response to this appeal issue, the project proposal found to be aligned with Blueprint Boise's policies and goals for the West Bench planning area. The comprehensive plan classified the subject property as a location for where significant new development and redevelopment anticipated. Under the most recent code change, the site was converted to MX3. The intent was to optimize the opportunity for higher density housing where it can be supported by existing transportation infrastructure. As mentioned earlier, this proposed project meets the use specific form standards and dimensional standards of MX3. In response to appeal ground 2, city staff did not mislead the public at any point of the review process. The Design Review Commission is specifically tasked with evaluating site design and building design as it relates to city code and adopted design guidelines. The DRC does not consider use or density. There was no substantial evidence presented in design review hearing to trigger any exception. This section of code has been interpreted consistently across all project applications. The appellant contends that the project provided inadequate amount of parking. The current code gives 50% parking reduction as an incentive for projects that provide affordable housing. And this project qualifies for using this incentive, and the project's request for parking reduction was at 40%. Additionally, I want to point it out that the project site is within 5 minutes walk to large-scale employment, grocery, many restaurants, offices, clinics, retail destinations, and public transit routes. As such, using alternative transportation is highly feasible for residents of this project. Further, the appellant also contends error found in partner agencies' comments and the concerns were not addressed. In response to this appeal, all commenting agencies, as conditioned, found this project meet their policies and standards, and all the concerns were addressed as outlined in the project report. We have police staff here available for any questions you may have. In response to the appeal ground about health and livability, the project provides an internal pathway network with landscaping, internal fitness room, and an outdoor unstructured common deck with raised planters for recreational uses. The project considered and provided for the health and livability of the existing neighbors by meeting the neighborhood transition standards and reduce the impact to building design as well. The project's south boundary is abutting R2 residential district, where it triggers neighborhood transition standards as required in city code. This standards requires building to provide additional setback as illustrated in the top right graphic. The proposed building setback is illustrated in the bottom right graphic. As you can see, the setback provided by the project has exceeded what's required by this section of code. Here's a realistic rendering of how this building setback is being applied into the building design. Further, I'm locating inside the top floor of the building setback further from the street to make building mass smaller, less imposing to the adjacent uses. This was one of the changes made to address the neighbors' concerns received at the initial design review hearing. The appellant contends the property value will be reduced because of the development. In response to this, as outlined in the council packet, property value is not a design review finding of approval. In response to the last appeal ground, the DRC reviewed all the materials presented from the public record and determined that the project is allowed use and allowed form, and it complies with Boise City Code, the design review guidelines, and goals and policies of Blueprint Boise. The DRC was in their purview set forth by the City Development Code and protected the public interest under the authority by reviewing the application for such consideration. In summary, the grounds for appeal do not demonstrate an error in Design Review Commission's decision. With that, the planning team recommends City Council to deny the appeal and uphold the application's approval. That concludes my presentation. I remain standing if we have any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. I will take questions for Catherine now.
Madam Mayor. Catherine, thank you very much for this. I just want to clarify to make sure I heard correctly that when a design review appeal, things, the condition of density is not a consideration within design reviews purview. Is that correct?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Clovis, that is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, in the appeal raised, were there any, I didn't see any errors they pointed to in the decision. Were there any errors alleged in the appeal?
Madam Mayor, Council Member Nash, the appeal grounds received were in general very broad. The appellant contends that the Design Review Commission failed to adequately address concerns about public safety, health, and the property value to the decision making.
And then ground 4.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, I believe ground 4 is not an error specifically to this project's findings or the project proposal.
Madam Mayor, if I could
Yeah.
just have a comment that I'd like the applicant to address.
Yep.
This is a common theme if you read any of our decisions the last few weeks. Recently had a Supreme Court case that talked about the standard of review as it comes to decisions by lower bodies. We've delegated authority to the Design Review Commission. We have a responsibility under our code and now state law to adhere to those decisions short of finding error, and we have to strictly adhere to those. So my invitation to the applicant would be, if there are grounds to overturn this decision, it has to be clearly demonstrated to us that there was an error on the part of the Design Review Commission. We can have a lot of conversation about the efficacy of this project, but much of that is restricted by what we're allowed to look at, which is, did they make this an error? So I would just extend that to the applicant, the appellant in this situation.
Further questions for staff? All right, welcome you on up as the appellant. And you're Larry, correct?
Yes, I am.
Nice to see you. We've seen you in here recently. Are you doing the whole presentation or is it all of you?
No, Eric will also do some. Hopefully, I have done this at home. It took about 8 minutes. Hopefully his will take about the same. So we might go over the 15 minutes that you allow sometimes.
Yeah, I'm going to ask you, 15 is it? If I give you more than 15, I got to give the other people more than 15. So we'll probably ask, you can answer the question from the council president separate from your presentation, but let's see how it goes, and we'll
you.
check in at time.
Thank you.
Yeah.
We know that you favor such projects as the one we are appealing. However, I ask you to put aside your biases and listen to our concerns. The applicant is correct. Most of our issues are with the city. Several places in the city's code and various documents, it is stated the character of the neighborhood should not be changed. Obviously, having a 6-story building with 212 units without enough parking in an area smaller than our development of 42 units changes the character of our neighborhood. 3 stories would be fine. I attended the appeal of the Federal Way project, and when this issue was presented, it was ignored. We cannot find who determines this or where an official has ruled on this issue. As an aside, if this issue is not a factor in determining if a project is approved or not, we believe you should eliminate such wording from the various city documents. City officials misled us in the January Design Review Commission meeting as to the authority of the commission. Several times it was stated the commission had no authority to reduce density or the size of the development. Even reading the first part of section 4B and stopping before it says, and I paraphrase, not quote, unless public safety, health, or property values are affected. Only after we reviewed the section did we realize we had been misled. We should have read the commission's authority in detail, but we are ordinary citizens and expect city officials to be forthright. Why is this important? Because we believe this project adversely affects all 3 of these issues. Public safety has obviously decreased. Since ACHD said the current road structure meets their standards, the Design Review Commission did not examine it in detail. However, we believe the ACHD did not do a thorough study. Eric will cover this in more detail, but I will touch on a few concerns. ACHD said parking would be an issue and that the city of Boise should verify there is adequate guest and tenant parking for this site. They went on to say that applicant may want to consider contacting the adjacent property owner of Burlington Coat Factory to see if it would be open to an agreement to allow residents to park within their parking lot. As far as we know, the city did not do a study and the developer did not contact the owner. To emphasize, the city numbers show the development may have as many as 280 cars with only 162 parking spots. Further, street parking is limited and will not handle 100 cars, maybe not even 30 or 40, and maybe even less than that if the police puts their no parking signs up. The police did state the lack of parking will create additional calls for abandoned vehicles and parking issues along North McKinney and surrounding area. With the parking issues, and I expect illegal parking, emergency vehicles will have difficulty entering, turning around, and exiting. ACHD reports in one place that PM peak traffic on Fairview was 1,201. Right afterwards, they said 29,900 for 24 hours on May 1st. Divided by 24, one gets 1,245 per hour, which is more than the stated peak hour traffic. We are not sure why public officials do not ask for clarification of this. Entry on Fairview with no lights will be hazardous, especially during rush hours. Fairview is the only exit, as both McKinney and El Dorado dead-end streets. There are two other exits which are questionable legality. One would be on Winston, which is a private lane, putting young kids who reside there at risk. The other is through the Burlington parking lot. Because of the crowded condition due to the number of vehicles, pedestrians, both adults and kids, will be at risk. We believe car accidents will increase due to the increased number of cars attempting to find parking spots and entering and exiting Fairview. The project does have a small balcony and workout area on the second floor for kids to play. However, we believe kids will play in the streets and parking lots as the project's only green area has bushes and trees, and there is no park that the kids can walk to. In summary, when all these issues are examined, we believe public safety is adversely affected, and the Design Review Commission did not adequately address these concerns. We believe the reduction of livability and enjoyment due to the lack of privacy and not having sunsets will affect the mental and emotional health of some of our older citizens, maybe even some of us younger ones. Also, I leave it to you to decide if children's health is affected by not having a green area to play in. We submitted a real estate broker professional opinion that units in our development along McKinney will go down by 75,000. Those further away by lower amounts. One member of the Design Review Commission raised the issue. The city official who responded seemed to discount the issue and said something like, and I did not catch his exact words, that it had to be substantial or didn't make any difference. We believe 75,000 is substantial, especially for older citizens whose next large cost is a care facility to live in. Nothing else was said, and we believe the Design Review Commission did not adequately pursue this item. I did notice in the applicant's response that he said we did not prove this. I submit that he did not disapprove it. We had a professional give his opinion. I don't see where a professional said it will not decrease the values. If this proves to be true, will the city reimburse us for our loss? I doubt it. Based on the above, we believe the Design Review Commission did not adequately consider these items where they have authority and erred in giving their approval. Thus, we believe you should approve our appeal or return to the project to the Design Review Commission where these issues could be addressed in detail. Regardless of your decision, we would like answers to the following questions. Who determines if the character of the neighborhood is affected? Could we have a copy of their determination? Why were city officials not forthright as to the Design Reviews Commission's authority? Did the city do a study on parking as recommended by ACHD? If so, could we have a copy of it? What is the amount of decreased property values before they can become an issue? Thank you.
Thank you. All right, you guys are really close because you've got 7:15 left, so I'm sure you're going to make it.
So he covered some of mine. I'll go over some other stuff. So yeah, one thing I'd like to know is the city ordinance that allows reduction of 50% parking. Where did that come from? Is there a study or something that you can provide for us? The developers even said in October that developments like this see a one-to-one, and that's just the people living there. What about visitors that come? So the parking for 162 is inadequate. The Boise police state that there's 50 parking spots short, and that's going to cause problems. So transportation. So you said there's no bad data and stuff. Here's the bad data. So PM traffic count on Fairview, ACHD said it was 1,201 for peak PM traffic count. They took a traffic study on Cole, on Fairview east of Cole, 29,900 for a 24-hour period. Divide that by 24, you get 1,246, which is greater than the 1201. So where did that 1201 come from? I contacted ACHD. PAC said he pulled it out of a database. He didn't know where the data came from, didn't know when it was done, couldn't give me, the raw data and stuff for it. So I'm like, okay, that's obviously bad data. So what should be done? Well, according to ACHD traffic code, section 7106.5, it says if no current peak traffic count exists, the developer must conduct a count in accordance with accepted traffic counting methods. All new traffic counts must be 48 hours continuous, taken Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, and may be adjusted for the month it was taken. Weekend counts will be required and stuff. So was that done? No, it wasn't. So this shot is included in the developer or in the packet that the developing committee did. If this didn't matter, why did they include it? If they're not looking at transportation and stuff, why include this data in it? So this is bad, and it should be tested according to ACHD traffic code. City zoning code. So the one on the left, that was before this development was proposed. About 3/4 of the development you can see is in yellow. That means that it's residential or 1 or 2 story business. That was changed to MX3. Also, the Orchards development was changed to MX3. Well, that's a single story residential with a clubhouse and stuff. Those people probably won't sell out to a developer, so that'll be single level residential for many years to come. So why was that area changed to MX3? Well, because of like what the committee said, you have to have these setbacks. And they changed the setback on the 7th or on the 6th floor, but all the other ones above 35 feet are not setback. So why was that changed to MX3? Well, because they didn't want to cut down probably maybe 20, 30, 40 apartments because of this setback. So, should we enforce the city code, or should we just change the zoning to however, we see fit? So yeah, city code, why have it? The last one I want to talk about is the intersection at El Dorado and Fairview. This is currently a really bad intersection. So all the people on El Dorado, that's a dead end street, so they have to come out El Dorado. Doing a left-hand turn on Fairview. If you see 1 right there, that's the left-hand turn lane going eastbound on Fairview. Where 2 is, there's an island that starts there. So if you want to turn out and merge right onto westbound Fairview, you really can't do that because at 2, it has an island there. So you have to basically stop up all of the turn lane. On 3, there's a Northwest Animal Hospital that has a in-out driveway there. 4, there's an in-out driveway there for blank force space. So that intersection coming north on El Dorado has a lot of cars and stuff coming out of businesses, coming off on Fairview. And then if you're in a car going north on El Dorado and come up to Fairview, the Northwest Animal Hospital has a sign. It's labeled 5 on there. That's right on the edge of the sidewalk. When you come up to it, you have to almost pull out into the bicycle lane to be able to see cars coming on the other side of that. What that does, and I've had this happen, where pedestrians are walking across, they're like, oh, you're sticking out, so I'll walk behind you. So what does that do if a car is coming off of Fairview in and there's a pedestrian 15, 20 feet down where they're not expecting it? That's a hazard. And currently, so on El Dorado, there's currently about 220 units, apartment complexes, condos and stuff. This one development will double that. Sure, some people will go out McKinney, but a lot of people will go out onto El Dorado. And I'm the resident manager at one of the apartment complexes. I've talked to people and they go through Burlington Coat Factory out Albertson's parking lot to get out to Cole because they do not want to try to do a left-hand turn on that intersection. So this development is going to really increase the problems and issues and maybe accidents and maybe even a fatality with pedestrians. So I would like you guys to review that and I would say cut down the development to a realistic height, maybe 100, 110 units. So all of the parking could be done on, in the development. Increase the amount of open or green space within the development. Change the orchard zoning back to residential, so you have the appropriate setback and stuff. And then the Channel 6 lady, she described this as like a Chicago project. It was the first one was really plain walls and stuff, no balconies. I would say put balconies and stuff on it and make it more like a livable thing instead of, kind of a prison or whatever.
Great, thank you. Questions?
Madam Mayor, I had come back.
We've got some questions.
I have some questions for you.
Sure.
You had a slide in 3 or 4 back that you glossed over, and I wanted to keep going. One more. I saw a slide that you had that I felt like you clicked on rather quickly, and I wanted to see what else it said. Okay, sorry, go forward. Oh, we saw these. Keep going. Yeah, wasn't this one. All right, well.
So this was my
I've
concern.
got it. I just need you to have a question first.
Yeah, my question was, he had brought something up before and just barely mentioned it. And I thought if I could see the slide, then I'd be reminded of what it was. It just was so fast, but I don't want you to have to go on a fishing expedition either.
And if you come back to it, we can pick it up again.
Perfect. Thank you. Do you have a copy of your presentation?
Yeah, so these are the slides I gave them to her. And I have also like a 17 or 18 page PDF that has a lot more data.
Okay, I'll see if I can grab that and come back to you. Thank you.
I've sent both of those to the city council.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, I just have a couple comments that I'm hoping the applicant can address based on the appellant's testimony. One,
Oh, wait, just before we do that, anything further for the appellant, just so there's not confusion?
All right, we're good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
And now, just so we're not.
If we did consider the rezone application of this property, I remember it as a non-event. I do not remember including the appellant's property in that rezone. So if you could speak to that decision, if that's in fact what happened. And then second, if you could speak to some of those setbacks that the appellant talked about that they may have been entitled to had they not been rezoned, about how that would affect the project. And then if there are any design choices that the appellant brought up regarding like balconies or so forth. I'll just say this broadly about the decision for these types of projects to be by right. The feedback that we got from the zoning code was we want to allow these types of projects, but we want to still be able to control so that they look good, which is why we've maintained the design review process. So that's an important part of design reviews work here and what we set out in our code.
Thank you. We will now hear from the applicant.
Good evening. Excuse me. Good evening, Madam Mayor and council members. My name is Tony Hill. I'm general counsel at J. Fisher Companies, its affiliate and subsidiaries. With me tonight, I have Owen Fisher, who's our founder and current CEO, and as well Matt Crambuel, who's our development manager for our affordable arm. I think Matt just stepped out, actually. He'll be back.
Is that
Oh.
Matt?
He
Okay,
snuck
great.
up behind me. Sorry. So it's great to be with you tonight. We appreciate this opportunity. Catherine did a great job addressing the grounds for appeal. So we won't add too much to that. Most were directed at the city. We felt there were two that we could really address specifically as the developer. The first being the project fundamentally alters the established residential neighborhood through incompatible density, heights, and scale. As just mentioned, we're in the MX3 zone. We didn't request the rezone. The property, when we joined forces with the city, it was already zoned MX3. Our project was designed, and in January, we had a design review meeting with public comment. We took that feedback, and in February came back with a redesign, incorporating that feedback to make the project more palatable for everybody. That was unanimously approved, and it was deemed compliant with code. And further in the city staff planning report dated January 8th, a lot of these questions that have arisen were addressed as we have satisfied the code that governs our project to get more affordable housing into Boise City. Specifically in section 5, the structure and design portion. And this talks to setbacks. It talks about how we've helped reduce the impact this development may have on adjacent properties. And when the zoning code was established, these setbacks weren't just thrown out arbitrarily. They had an intent, and the setbacks each had an intent as well. So from 0 to 35 feet, our building setback 12 feet, 2 more than required. From 35 feet to 70 feet, we're set back 30 feet. As Catherine mentioned and had a great diagram, that is all compliant with code. In section 5, the impact to the residential area, there are concerns about green space and vegetation for our residents and children. Staff stated that landscape buffers are provided between different uses with trees planted where possible. Therefore, the planning team believed the building and site design has minimized impacts on adjacent residential zoning districts and residential uses. In addition to the green space that we could provide, we have great amenities on the second floor. After the January design review, we doubled the size of that to incorporate a better area for kids, residents to go play in a safe manner.
Madam Mayor, could I get clarification on this slide? Because we've had the appellant bring up, could you go back to that slide? No, yep. We've had the appellant bring up that I would assume to the east that there are no setbacks. I assume this is coming from the north Are you talking about the north side?
This is the side that abuts the R2 residential neighborhood.
The south side? Okay. All right. But there's not similar setbacks on the east side abutting because that's MX3, which is what was in dispute, correct?
I do not believe we have any setbacks. I'm going to defer to Matt on some of the more project specific questions. It's just not information I get in the weeds on.
I could speak to that. In January, there was no step back on that east side in January, but in response to the community feedback that we received, we stepped back the 6th floor of the property approximately 15 feet.
Okay, so there has been a change since last time.
That is correct.
So in summation for this first grounds for appeal that we'll address, city staff has a great quote in its report that says staff finds the project complies with section 11-05-05.3D subsection 3 of the zoning ordinance, the design review guidelines, and the goals and policies of the Boise City Comprehensive Plan. That's what we intend to do as a developer in every city we go. We don't want to come in and change code and make something that fits us. We want to work where we are and do something that fits the city and what you all or your predecessors have deemed appropriate for Boise City, its current residents and its future residents. The second point or grounds for appeal we'll address is that the city officials misled our HOA in regards to Design Review Commission's authority as to public safety, health, and property values. Catherine did a great job touching on safety and health, but I'll focus on the property values briefly. In the broker's opinion, it does a great job providing comparable properties. But when we reviewed it, there was no demonstrative evidence that our project would decrease values by $75,000, let alone $10,000. Not that either is good, but without having demonstrative evidence, that's just an opinion that someone mentioned having been commissioned for a report. On the final conclusion slide or page of that report, Kirk Hessing, who authored the opinion, stated, potentially this would decrease the values of the properties up to $75,000 for the units that are closest to the structure and gradually have less impact as they get further away. So without evidence that there's another project in Boise City that abutted a residential neighborhood with the same height and density as ours, it's difficult to draw the line as to how $75,000 came to be. One of our main goals as a market rate and affordable developer is to combat the housing crisis that faces cities across the country. In the Boise City Needs Analysis 2024 report update, it states housing demand continues to remain high in Boise. The city will require 2019 new or significantly renovated units each year over the next 10 years. 47% of this demand is for affordable housing to individuals and households earning less than 80% of the area median income. 6 out of every 10 households earning less than 80% of the AMI are housing cost burdened, meaning that they pay over 30% of their monthly income to housing costs. When we designed this per code and had it unanimously approved by the Design Review Committee, our goal was to help chip away at the required units that this report that the city ordered would satisfy, to get not just affordable housing for residents, but high quality affordable housing that residents can be proud to call home. It's based on this and the project's compliance, as stated by staff, with the zoning ordinance, with the design review guidelines, and with the city's comprehensive plan, we respectfully request a denial of the appeal.
Thank you. I'll take questions now for the applicant, excuse me. Is ACHD on the phone? Yes, okay, I'll take that in a minute. But ACHD, if you'll stand ready. Any other questions for the appellant? Okay, I'll go ahead and thank you.
Thank you.
Take questions. If ACHD is willing, we'll take those now. Hi there.
Hi, Edinson. Madam Mayor. I have a couple of questions. I was wondering if you could just help us understand was there a traffic study? Is ACHD concerned about the traffic that might be going on El Dorado? Or is there assurance that it would stay on McKinney? Can you just speak to that concern about the traffic and the safety there?
Madam Mayor, council member, good afternoon. For the record, Edison Bautista, representing Ada County Highway District. So absolutely, in reference to the traffic generated from this application so ACHD did heard the neighborhood concerns has detailed in our staff report in the finding of consideration. Our traffic team went to collected new data on El Dorado and McKinley Lane on 2024. This happened on September, has detailed in the staff report. And based on their findings and based on the expected trips generated for the trips per day and the vehicle per hour, there's no concerns highlighted besides what's detailed on those findings as far as I can see in the staff report.
Thank you.
Anything further for Edinson?
Madam Mayor, I think I have a
Yes.
question for the applicant, if I could.
Yes, the applicant.
My question was about the setbacks and the effect of the property. The 15-foot setback that you've done since January, do you know if that's affecting the number of units at all?
It is, yeah. So we lost approximately five units by stepping back the property since January. We were able to relocate those units based on some of the other modifications that we made since January, primarily by flipping the courtyard from the south to the north. The benefit of that was reducing the total length of that north facade. I believe you had asked a question, what would the impact be if we were to comply with the same setbacks on the south of the property?
The east of the property.
On the east of the property, yes. If we applied those same setbacks, I estimate we would lose 20 to 25 units on this property.
And what would prevent you from moving those units to the north side of the property behind those other businesses there? Is that existing parking? Is that what we're trying to provide for there?
On the north side?
Mm-hmm. I don't see an aerial. I'd probably need to see an aerial view to be able to.
Our property is already 10 feet off of the property line on that north elevation. And so we would, we do not own that property to the north.
No place else to go. Okay. Madam Mayor, could I ask a question of staff on the when this property was rezoned, excuse me, the appellant's property was rezoned, assuming that the appellant's and the applicant's property was rezoned at the same time?
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, I believe your question was about was rezone part of the application process? Oh.
So it seems like the appellant or the applicant has told us that it was not part of the application process, but the neighbors are contending that they lost a right to setbacks because the property was rezoned at some point, presumably in light of this project. So I'm trying to understand at what point was the decision made for the appellant's property and part of the applicant's property to be rezoned MX3.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Nash, I believe the applicant property and the appellant's property were rezoned at the same time under the modern zoning code rewrite. The site was converted from C to D to MX3 as part of the citywide conversion rules. The setback, the appellant referred in his presentation was not a dimensional setback required by this zone. It was actually the neighborhood transition standards. The neighborhood transition standard, give me one moment, let me pull up the slides. So it'll be easier for everybody to understand. So the purpose of neighborhood transition standard is to help higher density housing is planned or developed on next to a lower density housing. It requires the building to provide additional setback along the abutting property line to minimize such impact. In this project, as I mentioned earlier in my presentation, the abutting side, the only side that's the higher density, the only side that the project would trigger neighborhood transition standards at the south property line, because that is where the MX3 is abutting R2.
So if I could interrupt, I think I might have when you started talking about neighborhood transition standards, that reminded me that in the modern zoning code, we rezoned MX3 in places that were within an eighth of a mile from and I think that's when this rezone happened, when you just described it as it happening during the modern zoning code. So it seems like that was the justification for doing it, not anything related to the project, but because it was within a eighth of a mile from a high transit corridor. So I think I've answered my own question. So, but thank you for your input.
Correct.
Madam Mayor, question for the applicant as well. So the appellant mentioned parking, a 50% reduction, but my understanding from the record is that you actually took a 40% reduction, not the full 50. Can you just speak to why? Was that just naturally you had that number of spaces within the floors that you already had? Why you're only taking 40% and not the 50% that you'd be allowed to take?
Yeah, thank you. Great question, Councilmember. The building is, the first floor of the building is concrete, and then the remaining floors are made out of wood construction. We wanted the east and north elevations to include walk-up ground floor units and the leasing office. The remainder of that first floor would naturally be available for parking. So we could have, moved more amenities to the first floor, but just given the general circulation of the property, it seemed to lay out the best to design it as we did.
Okay, and then just a follow-up, Madam Mayor. So thinking about the project's parking needs, what kinds of analysis do you already do to identify how much parking you think will be needed for the types of tenants that you're going to be marketing to?
Yeah, that's a great question as well. We have a portfolio of affordable housing projects in the state as well as in Utah. We have found that parking demand can range from 0.5 parking spaces per stall to just over 1 parking space per stall. That said, we are going to take into account the number of parking spaces at the property as we are working with tenants to understand, whether or not they have multiple cars, and really factoring that into our lease up process. We have also found that individuals who live in our properties tend to work all 3 shifts, and so there is availability of parking throughout the day.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just a quick clarification. You said 0.5 parking spots per stall. Did you mean per unit?
Per unit, yeah.
Thank you. I knew what you meant. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
We will now hear from members of the public that haven't testified yet. Sir, are you here to testify? Nope. All right. Anybody else in the room? We'll check online. Madam Mayor, I have two online. This is Ariana Risco. Great. Welcome, Ariana.
Hello there. Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right. I'd like to say hello and thank you for the opportunity to chat in here. I am in the Winston neighborhood that is right around the corner from the McKinney side of things. I do serve on the HOA of this neighborhood. We have 14 homes along this one private road strip. I do have some points that I'd like to make, some contribution. I do largely agree with a lot of the things that Larry and Eric both said. I also have some questions just to clarify some understanding. And I'd just like to know if there's an appropriate way for me to go about this. I'd just like a little bit of guidance if that's helpful for you.
Ariana, we don't take, we can hear your questions, but there's not a back and forth in the public testimony portion. However, if I would imagine that either the applicant might be able to address them in his rebuttal, or we can connect you with staff afterwards for follow-up.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. I believe that most of these would be technically construed as questions for the applicant. First of which I would say that to kind of back up what Larry and Eric were saying, traffic and safety is a really big concern for us. We already have quite a lot of examples of people who enter and cut through our neighborhood. The Winston is a private lane. It's a good shortcut that people like to use to get from Fairview to Emerald on the backside of the neighborhood. We have children, pets, and disabled adults that all live on the street of Winston. So that has been a concern for us and is, of course, an increasing concern given this new development plan. One of the most concerning things so far is the parking, of course. 0.5 spaces per apartment per unit is an interesting number for me to see on the screen, because when you have, I just pulled these from the screen that we just had up, of 59 single bed, 128 two-bed units, and 25 three-bed units. Is it reasonable to expect that there will be multiple adults per unit that will each have a vehicle? And that totals up to a maximum, of course, of 390 possible adult residents. I understand that's not realistic to assume that everyone would be of driving age, but as far as adults per unit, as opposed to stalls per unit overall, that seems like that would decrease it significantly. If you have, that many adults going for half a parking space per unit, is that my understanding? Is that correct? And is that normal for this type of project at this size, this scale, this number of apartments, occupants, what have you? And that is the end of my first question.
All right. Yeah, we're not going to have answers now. The applicant might choose to address some of these things in his final comments. You've got about 20 seconds left for whatever else you'd like to share with us.
Okay. Essentially, I think the overall sentiment is we can say that what Eric said is the area and zoning was adjusted to fit the project, whether it wasn't necessarily for the project, rather than the project being built to fit the zoning. That's my biggest concern so far, and I understand that we're technically adhering to our codes right now, but it still doesn't feel like the codes are actually a good fit for our neighborhood. Thank you.
All right. I appreciate that, Ariana. Thank you.
Of course. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, second is Greg Wilson. I'm sorry, somebody Wilson. I didn't catch the first name. Greg, welcome.
Can you hear me?
Yes, although I'll encourage you to speak up just a bit.
Okay. We've told you about the problems this development has with traffic, parking, safety, failure to comply with the nature of the neighborhood, the ridiculous density, the real estate broker's professional opinion that there would be a decrease in value of condos in our complex of $75,000. We don't particularly like the idea of having a low-income housing project in our neighborhood, but we understand the need. What we don't understand is why the development approval is so incompatible with the tenets of the Planning, Zoning, and Review Commissions. We're looking at a development that proposes 212 apartments in a 6-story building. Let's consider what might be reasonable. If the development were 1/3 the size, instead of 6 stories, consider a 2-story building. If it had 1/3 as many apartments, then it would have 70 or so apartments. A 2-story building would at least be compatible with the size of the nature of the neighborhood. Density would still be a problem. Our community has 42 units in a physical area 1.5 times as big as the proposed development, so the density is more than twice that of the neighborhood. And by the way, all the owners in our condo complex are against this project, whether they've showed up tonight or not. If the development were 2 stories, the capacity could be reasonably accommodated, and the people-scaled portion of the intent would be more reasonable. Views would not be unreasonably blocked, and the neighborhood character would not be changed beyond consideration. There could also be more green areas available for children and pets, improving one of the safety concerns. The parking issue might then be managed. The traffic issue would still be worse. The statement that the development, quote, meets the zoning requirements, unquote, is ridiculous because the zoning requirements don't fit this location and are only the so-called requirements on paper. No one with any common sense would look at this project and say it should be approved for this area. Was this project approved because it's what the mayor wants? The mayor has a need, but applying that need in this manner to this location makes no sense. I guarantee if the mayor lived where we do, she wouldn't want this monstrosity built next to her. Why couldn't this project be done on the property across the street from Albertsons at Cole and Fairview? Then it doesn't screw up the nature of the neighborhood. It gives access to 2 major thoroughfares, and density might be less of a problem. Frankly, we're disgusted that this development reached approval in our area. But I'll finish with my question. Are you going to justify this development because it's the easiest thing to do? Or are you going to listen to what we've explained to you and do something right?
All right, Greg, thank you very much. Any more? He seems to have taken me quite literally when I suggested that he speak up. We could hear you loud and clear. All right, we have nobody else from the public here to testify. So we are going to move into rebuttals, but first see if any council members have questions for city staff.
Madam Mayor, I have a quick question for staff. I think that there's a park that was, I want to do my best in our deliberation to answer some of the questions. I don't know if I captured all of them, but some of the questions. One of them was about a walkable park. I know it's a city goal to have a 10-minute walk for all communities in our neighborhood. In our city. And I think I could find a park about a 15-minute walk, which is not up to standard, but can you confirm that that's what we're looking at for the nearest park?
Well, and I want to be clear on up to standard. We've set the policy goal. We don't have a standard or level of service for 10 minutes, but that is our policy.
Yes, it's the goal. Yes. Yeah.
Madam Mayor, council members, that the closest park I believe is the Winstead Park. I think it's a mile away from the subject park.
Thank you.
20-minute walk. Okay.
The new park we just purchased.
Is that on the record? I was wondering if Fry is right here. I thought it was.
Fry's right across the street. I don't know if it's within the 10-minute walk, but it's right across the street.
Okay.
Madam Mayor?
Yes.
Can I just have staff clarify? I think we had someone provide public testimony and about the parking spots, and I think there's some confusion. So I'm looking at 162 parking stalls for 212 units.
Madam Mayor, Councilmember Morales, that is correct.
So it's really kind of closer to like 0.75 per unit. Yeah. Okay. Thanks.
And I'm sorry, Madam Mayor, I have one other question for staff. There was a point made that the police department weighed in on the parking. Do you know if the police had an opportunity to review this application?
Yes, I believe we have police staff available online to answer this question.
Oh,
Do we have somebody from the police department online?
Can you hear me? This is Ed Fritz, Crime Prevention, Boise Police Department.
Hi, Ed.
Madam Mayor, Council.
We,
Could you
we
repeat
can
the
hear
question?
you just fine. Yep.
Great. I've had a little bit of trouble
Yeah,
with
we
my
gotcha.
computer tonight, so I apologize.
Nope, you're good.
Council member, could you repeat the question, please, about the parking?
yeah, the appellant had mentioned that Boise police said that we're 50 parking spots short. And I wondered if you could provide some context as to that review and short of what?
Correct. And so there was 50, the quote from there was 50 spots less than the number of units on there, and those potentially being vehicles if it was full parking out to the street.
Okay, thank you. So just to clarify, so the comment then from Boise PD was that there's 50 parking spots fewer than apartment units?
That is correct.
Okay, thank you.
Madam Mayor, just for the record, that was the screenshot I was looking for, was the Ed. So thank you, Ed.
Anything else for staff? Do we have other surprise staff online that we should know about? Nope. All right. We'll go ahead. The applicant now goes first to wrap things up, and then the appellant gets the last word.
Thank you. So, Council Member Morales, you kind of stole my thunder on our response. On the parking, it is approximately 0.76 stalls per unit. And as part of the development and amenities, we anticipate we have a ride sharing program at Franklin. If you're familiar with it, car parked on site and you access it to go where you need to go. We anticipate using that same program here because it's been so well received by the Franklin residents.
Oh, I'm just curious. Do you have data on, you don't have to give it to us now, but would you share the data of usage
Yeah, for
related
sure.
to the Franklin? That'd be interesting to see.
Yeah,
Great.
yeah, we
thanks.
can get that.
Yeah, if you just send it to staff, that'd be great.
Okay,
Thanks.
no problem. Otherwise, we anticipate our residents, like in other projects we have in our portfolio, using the public transport to get to where they need to go. And as Matt alluded to earlier, a lot work multiple shifts. So we don't anticipate issues with multiple people fighting for that single last parking spot or something along those lines. Additionally, there won't be any on-street parking allowed by our residents on McKinney and El Dorado. We have on-site staff that will closely monitor that and take appropriate measures as necessary. And we can share all that information with you as well as those occurrences happen or with the police to make sure everything's being addressed properly. Otherwise, I think that answers the questions that were raised during the public comment section. So thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll hear from the appellant. Welcome back.
Hi. So ACHD never answered the question about Fairview and the amount of traffic and stuff on that. He talked about doing a study on El Dorado and he covered El Dorado and McKinney, but he didn't address the Fairview, where that 1,201 peak traffic count comes from. I would like that answered before this goes through because they make a acceptable level of service for a 5-lane principal arterial is 1,780. And yeah, 1,200 is a lot less than that, but it's less than the 24-hour average. So, you know, where did that number come from? And then the other one I want to address is zoning. So you did MX3 all up and down the Fairview corridor. Is that what we want Fairview to look like? I've been down to like LA and stuff and tall buildings, you know, lined streets and stuff. Is that what we want for Fairview? Do we want 5, 6-story buildings completely lining Fairview all the way down? Or do we want, more responsible building and zoning? And like the last person talking, there's a lot on the corner of Cole and Fairview that's empty being sold right now. A 6-story building could be put up right there, and there's 2 high traffic arterials right there on the corner. They don't need to go to uncontrolled in intersections. So why isn't that area used? And condos and stuff have been built behind the car wash. Those are only 2 stories. Why wasn't a 6-story building put up there? So that's what I want to ask. Do we want Fairview to be 4 to 6-story building all the way down? Or, do we want more, responsible, controlled?
Since parking seems to be a hot issue, I will address that for a couple of seconds. And again, like I said earlier, most of our complaints or issues are really the city and not the applicant. I think they followed most of the items, and if they didn't, we're not smart enough to know where they didn't do it. But as far as parking, the city of numbers actually say that they expect up to 280 cars for this unit. And if I followed correctly a little bit ago, and I could not hear the applicant very well, that there's not going to be street parking along McKinney and El Dorado. So if you put 160 cars, round numbers, and you have 280, I have no idea where another 120 cars are going to go. Burger King parking lot, that's going to become a zoo, and I suspect they'll get sued. Somebody will be. They'll have a wreck there. The same with the no non-parking on McKinney and El Dorado. I suspect the police will get call after call after call. So again, think about if the 280 number is correct for the number of cars, there's no parking, none. Thank you.
Thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing.
Madam Mayor,
Yes.
move that the appeal of DRH 24-253 be denied and that the decision of the Design Review Commission to approve the construction of a new 6-story multifamily residential building at 1505 North McKinney Lane in an MX3 zone be confirmed, and the record reflects that the grounds for the appeal do not demonstrate an error in the Design Review Commission decision.
Second.
We have a motion second, and I'll just explain, in order to have a discussion, we have to have a motion on the floor. That's why that happened so quickly. And so now discussion.
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I might have some more thoughts on this as the discussion goes out. I would just harken back to Mr. Wilson's comments about you, Madam Mayor, about what you would do if you were voting on this and if it was in your neighborhood. This is in my neighborhood. This is a place that I've lived for. I lived very close to this project for 8 years. Now I live a little further away from it. And I'd also bring up the comments made about, is this the type of thing that we want to see along Fairview Avenue? And this also ties back to some of the points I was getting at. When I was pestering staff and the applicant, trying to understand the transition standards and those setbacks, what I was worried about is the city wearing its developer hat or the applicant had denied you those transition standards through something specific to this property. And what I recalled is that anything within 1/8 of a mile from Fairview Avenue, and we did the same thing along Vista and along State Street, that we zoned MX3. And the purpose of that is we wanted mixed use development, high density mixed use development along areas that are high value transit corridors. And the reason for this goes back to parking. We want people to be able to, we want these types of developments to have less impact on the city as a whole. And the goal of that is if we can reduce the number of cars that people have related to a development by putting them, helping them live near high capacity transit corridors, then we can reduce those impacts. Additionally, as far as do we want this to be the type of thing that we have at Fairview, the answer to that is yes, and it's resoundingly yes. And that's why we had these, we rezoned within an eighth of a mile of a high transit corridor, this to be MX3. It was previously a quarter mile. So, but based on feedback from the community, we reduced that to an eighth of a mile. Ideally, we would have that as a quarter mile so that people that are within walking distance of a bus stop can live in the types of homes that would accommodate them to be able to live without a car. I will say the height in MX3, I can understand how that can have some growing pains for a place like Fairview Avenue. Right now, there's a minimum height of four stories in MX3. And to my knowledge, I don't know if there is a 4-story building along Fairview right now. There's some 3-story apartments that have been built. But yes, this is the type of development that we want to see along Fairview. I appreciate the testimony that's been given tonight from the community. I just want you to know that I value and respect your neighborhood. It's a place I've knocked many times. It's a place that my wife has sent me Zillow listings of when we considered buying a home when we were living in an apartment nearby. And we hope that the type of impacts that you've discussed are not something that are going to materialize. I want to speak to, I appreciate you citing code when you brought this up. We don't hear a lot of appeals that actually cite code and point out exceptions in those codes. And that's making us better decision makers by doing that. I do want to speak to the diminishing property values. I see that as an exception in here so that we're not, people can interpret that several different ways, but I see that as an exception that we put in code so that we don't force design review commission into a situation where they might be engaging in a taking. And I haven't seen any evidence here that would lead me to believe that any type of taking has occurred. I think there are some speculation about how it might affect property values. This is not something that I've seen materialize across other developments that we've approved nearby or around other homes. And I'm generally supportive of the project. And I appreciate the neighborhood for coming out and talking about this and engaging this in a meaningful way. We've wrestled, I can say personally, I've wrestled with each and everything that you've brought up. It would be my expectation that if people will know how many car spaces they have available when they choose to sign a lease there, and that they're not going to take that risk that they have to move a car every couple days along a public road, which are we've tried to address those with other ordinances to make sure that the cars aren't permanently camped out on along these public roads. So it would be my expectation that people that have multiple cars per unit are not choosing to live here because it doesn't accommodate their lifestyle. So for those reasons, I'd be denying this appeal. And yeah.
Madam Mayor, I just wanted to add, I think Council President Nash started us off well with the outlining the legal guardrails that we have when we're considering an appeal by the Design Review Committee. But I did want to be sure that we answered as many of the questions as we could that I jotted down and from my notes, and then I crossed out when the question was answered. So I do actually feel like most of the we did get answers for most of the questions that were brought up. My question to ACHD, I did specifically reference El Dorado and McKinney, but I also said, and the public safety concerns and traffic concerns. What we heard from ACHD, and there he is again, Henson, was that they do not have concerns. And as our partners that manage our city roads, they are the expert here, and we many, many times over have to take their word for their expertise in this. another note I have, a couple of questions were like, why was there a code allowance for parking reduction? Where did that come from? And also about the rezone, where did that come from? Similarly to Council President Nash referencing the Fairview, the intention for Fairview, all of this was part of the new zoning code that went into effect in 2023. That was after a years-long process that involved hundreds, if not thousands, of community members and residents in a very dynamic and robust process to end up where we were. To add on to the reasons that President Nash gave about the Fairview intention, it's not just because they're on transit, it's on a transit corridor, and therefore people don't need maybe as many cars. The areas that we've designated as being intentional for that kind of denser development also are because there's easier access to things like grocery stores or schools or jobs, things like that, with the idea that people don't have to spend as much time in their cars. Not only does it take cars off the road across the city for all kinds of commuters, but it also does things like preserve air quality because there's fewer emissions going into the air. It's less drainage on our infrastructure, roads, things like that. All of that costs our community less overall. I think that was so that was the intention of the parking reduction, to incentivize. We have very few tools that we can offer developers for things like affordable housing, which is one of the points we heard resoundingly from residents that they would like to see more of, and through that process is how those came about. I just wanted to give you a little bit more context on that.
Madam Mayor, I want to thank you all for coming out, sharing your testimony, your concerns, seeking to make it a better project. I want to thank the applicant for all the work that's gone into this project. Eric, I appreciated your question about where did the 50% reduction come from? Was that just made up? And my personal opinion, I think most parking minimums are kind of made up. Try to figure out a best guess. There really isn't a lot of data that says exactly how many cars a project should have. There's so many variables, different areas, amenities. And if you look at communities across the country, you have parking minimums that are based off of square footage, bedrooms, units like us, and they vary wildly. And a growing number of communities are getting rid of them altogether to allow the market to help decide. And I appreciate the applicant coming before us and helping show some of the data that they have for similar projects that can help them understand how much parking they need. Because I think probably the biggest travesty in a new project could be over parking it, having a bunch of empty spots that sit there that could have been bedrooms for families to start, or other folks to retire to, and those kinds of things. So I appreciate the conversation that we were able to have on those the parking minimums for this project. I also think, as Council President Nash indicated, best in class transit. Eric, you mentioned LA. LA is not known for its transit oriented development, but the modern zoning code really is trying to pair development with transit. And so when we have a best in class transit line, which means every 15 minutes during peak hours, someone can go out. You don't even need to check the schedule at that point, because within 15 minutes a bus is going to get there, could come in 2 minutes. You are able to rely on that for work. I would give you the keys to my second vehicle right now if I had transit, or if I had every 15-minute transit access in my neighborhood. I have to drive 10 minutes to the nearest bus stop. The bus stop next to this project is 13 minutes from downtown. That's a great ride. And so I think that's when you talk about, do we want Fairview to look like this? Yes, we want people that want to live in areas like this without having to pay a bunch of money for an extra vehicle or even a vehicle at all. And I think a lot of times we don't calculate those costs into housing, but those are costs. Depending on where you live, you're paying for another car payment, maintenance, insurance, all of these things. I also wanted to point out just the impact that this housing will bring and to our community. The Franklin was brought up tonight. I lived 0.3 miles away from that project a dozen years ago or so. it's been interesting watching the monthly rent for that same unit increase over time, from $520 a month when I was there to as high as $12.99 a month. But something interesting happened as the Franklin was about to open. It dipped down into the $900 a month range. That is where we are looking to try to increase supply of housing, because it does matter. It will matter to people. And so these units are very important, and really appreciated the information about rideshare. I think that's a whole different area that we haven't considered for projects like this, to be able to get more units of housing and less parking. The other factor is also working with Valley Regional Transit, which we had here today presenting a work session, to be able to ensure that our residents understand how to use this service. Riding the bus solely for 2 years to get downtown to my job, love it. I will evangelize about our transit. Those are just some of the few points I wanted to raise. I'll end now. Thanks.
Yeah, Madam Mayor. Yeah, thank you. I don't want to belabor. My fellow council members did a great job of elaborating why this project is a great fit and a good location. Our zoning code went through a very robust process, and it did end up with a result that, yes, we do. We do want this type of development in the MX, and that's why it was zoned MX3. I think the other things that is good about this is it's bringing people to where we want them, where they live, where they work, and where they play. So we want them living there. We want that density there. And this is going to reduce traffic trips on the road, as was mentioned before, and reducing sprawl, right? We're saying we don't want the sprawl out to our further communities that are now, these people, now our friends and neighbors have to commute an hour to get to work and an hour to get home. This is going to help reduce that sprawl and help increase the quality of life by being where you're closer to where you work and play. I think we're lucky to have a developer here today on this project that understands the needs for parking and is willing to do things like looking at the tenants who come in and how many vehicles that they have, and ensuring that there's a right fit, ensuring that they have monitoring for the street parking, and also looking at the rideshare program. I think those are three things that the developer really didn't need to bring, but they are proactively bringing to that. And I think you're pretty lucky to have that developer bring that to the table. The last thing I'm going to address is property values. And there's been several different studies out there that I've researched, one within Arkansas, within Utah, within Urban Institute in Alexandria, Virginia. And what they found is that there is little to no change in property values, and in many times an increase to the values that you're going to see there. Because the people that are going to come there in that development, you're going to provide other economic development. There's going to be other buildings, other businesses, and other amenities that are going to come with this. And I know you're kind of shaking your head at me that this isn't true, and I didn't think so either when I looked it up years ago. But it's absolutely true. And it's not Kathy Corliss's word. There's lots of studies out there. I encourage you to take a look at this. I think this is going to be a great development in the area, and I strongly support it. Thank you.
Madam Mayor, first of all, thank you. Thank you for coming. I'm always inspired and grateful by Boiseans who spend so much of their time doing this. You're not attorneys. You've really looked at this hard. You care about your neighborhood. It means a lot, and I'm glad that you're here. And I know that it's so painful when you don't get the result that you want. But if people stop caring, then we're in a world of hurt. We need people to continue to care and to speak up for their neighborhoods. So thank you. You probably noticed, that the vote's not going to go your way tonight. Lots of things have been said. I want to empathize with you that 6 stories is high. That is very high for that area. I get that. Part of the reason that it's 6 stories is that the new zoning code allows that. And the new zoning code's purpose, among many things, was to give folks the opportunity to build things about what the market could absorb, what the market could do. And we are seeing that here tonight. It is not lost on me how high that is. I just want you to know that. The code allows it. But what we're seeing is that they think they can pencil this. And so it's come before us. The other thing that makes us really unique is they get more units because of the affordability. And we hear all the time about the need for affordable housing. You know, it's not lost on anyone that wages haven't kept up with housing costs, and the opportunity to have affordable housing is something that we don't get very often. And I would much rather that private industry do it than the government fund it. So from my perspective, I need to embrace these things because that gives us the opportunity that it's not raising your taxes to do this. So anyway, I'll be voting for this. Thank you for coming. I know it's not what you wanted. Hope that you got a little bit more insight. Thank you for being part of our city, and just appreciate your engagement.
All right. Clerk, will you please call the roll? Willetts.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carries. I'll take a motion.
Madam Mayor, I move that we adjourn.
Second.
You have a motion, a second, clerk? Willetts.
Yes.
Corliss.
Yes.
Morales.
Yes.
Nash.
Yes.
Stead.
Yes.
All in favor, motion carried. We are adjourned. Thanks everybody for being here. Appreciate it.